What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Around the Felt. Today, we are breaking down the Kansas City Chiefs, their 2024 season, falling just short of the three-peat, and what we think they should do this offseason. I am your host, Colin Tong, with my good pal, Reagan Losher. How you doing, my friend? I love the hoodie. New York Yankees, let's go. It's almost baseball season. Spring training starts tomorrow.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, I got my Yankee stuff on. I got my basketball hat on for the Rockets, who are having a hell of a season. But hey, we're here to talk football. I'm
Yeah, we
excited.
are.
Let's talk Chiefs. I mean, hey, they may have not won the Super Bowl this year, but listen, they are a certified dynasty. And at the end of the day, you guys have been spoiled enough. It's all right to not win every Super Bowl.
True. So the question is, what grade do you give a team that won the title 2 years prior and fell just short of the Super Bowl this year? Although they did get their asses kicked in that Super Bowl.
Yeah, I would say probably. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard because it's like, for them, the expectation every year is like you have
Right?
Patrick Mahomes. You're guaranteed at least the AFC Championship game. So I would say a B plus, and
Oh my
a
God.
lot of it is just basically how outmatched they seemed in the Super Bowl. If it was closer, I probably would have said an A. But if it came down to the wire and it's like, all right, this time the Eagles got the best of you, like where the Chiefs just got by them in the first Super Bowl. I mean, they still won. I'm not taking away from them, but that was a very close Super Bowl. Where in this case, it was just domination, like 40-22. You look at that and you're like, it's not that bad. But that game was not 40-22. That was all in garbage time.
Yeah.
I mean, the Chiefs
Like
really.
talent wise, they looked outmatched.
Yeah, 100%. So to me, it's a B plus. Where a lot of other teams in that situation lose in that fashion in the Super Bowl. Like if that was the Bills, I'm probably still saying an A. It's just, look, you've won the past two Super Bowls. Like you expect to win. You expect with Patrick Mahomes that you will be in every single game, and you will never look like that. But they looked exactly like they did a couple years back against the Bucks when obviously the line had the issues. But this time your line was fully healthy. It wasn't like that Super Bowl where it was like all backups. And obviously, I think it's an issue. I mean, we'll get into what they can do for 2025, but right away, I would say they need to improve the offensive line. They need to, improve the weapons on offense, and there's some holes on the defense because, Philly just had an answer for everything. And even on the special teams game, I mean, they were dominating.
100%, man. So I had a similar debate mentally. I was at a B plus. I ended up going with an A minus. I get it with the expectations that they have, but it just seems so wrong to give a team that lost in the Super Bowl anything lower than an A minus. So that's why I ultimately landed on that. I mean, this is just what we've come to expect with this team. I know a lot of people hate the Chiefs now. It's just that's what comes with being a dynasty. But at the same time, you have to be objective here, no bias, and appreciate greatness. This is a dynasty that we are going to remember for the rest of our lives with Patrick Mahomes. And what's crazy to me about this dynasty is the different ways that they've gotten it done. Like when Mahomes first was the starter, they were lighting the league on fire, chucking the ball across the yard. Mahomes is throwing for 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns. Now they've kind of developed into a team where they're going to play really good defense. They were a top 10 defense, fourth in scoring. Offensively, though, they were kind of in the middle of the pack all season. And, you didn't have Rashee Rice. Hollywood Brown was out for a lot of the season. And it's like, you know what? It doesn't really matter what the stats say here because this team just always finds a way to win. And it's a testament to that coaching staff, Andy Reid and Spagnuolo specifically, and Patrick Mahomes. They just always win games. And you pointed it out, another Super Bowl loss for them in which their offensive line was terrible. Like, that's how you beat Patrick Mahomes is you got to have dogs on the defensive line. And Philly did. And there was no slippery grass to hold them back this time, like there was a couple years ago. You know what I mean?
The sod father couldn't get involved.
No, couldn't get involved. So, yeah, I mean, they got to figure out the tackle spot. Like Joe Tooney was really good at left tackle, but he's a natural guard. He's an all-pro guard. You kicked him out because you kind of had to. You didn't have a solid option at left tackle. You're relying on some young bucks that just didn't develop as you'd hope to. So they definitely need to address the offensive line. And what sucks is they have Trey Smith that's going to be a free agent who's probably going to command a ton of money, and it's going to be difficult for them to retain him. So that's going to be another hole along that offensive line. But, yeah, I had to go A minus for a team that lost in the Super Bowl, despite the fact that this is what we've come to expect from them.
Yeah, no, I mean, and Trey Smith is going to be a tough one because it seems like with these offensive linemen, they're hard to retain because it's so hard to find a good offensive lineman. So one of these shitty teams that their biggest issue has been
that has a
offensive
ton
line
of money.
are going to pay him the bag.
The
Well,
Patriots, the Commanders, they have so much money where the Chiefs are 1 million over the cap now. It's like you can't keep everybody.
And on top of that, I mean, Trey Smith also, it's like he has the rings. Like for a lot of linemen, you could be like, well, if they leave, they're not going to compete. Like at this point, it's like you already have a couple. I believe he has 2 rings now.
Yeah.
So, like,
get your bag. Get your bag.
It's kind of hard to say. Do I stay with the Chiefs for a hometown discount to win more rings, or is it like, hey, I get another $5 to $10 million a year elsewhere? It's hard when you're talking $40-50 million difference overall.
Oh, 100%. Well, Reagan, they have negative $1 million in cap space right now. Now that number might be a little different. They came out today with the projected salary cap for the 2025 season, and it was higher than what was anticipated. So teams are going to have a little bit more wiggle room here. So the Chiefs might have some money to play with. They could always restructure. If Kelce retires, that'll clear some. That's a big question mark as well. Some key free agents here: Trey Smith, as we mentioned, DJ Humphries along the offensive line, Kareem Hunt. I mean, I could see him coming back on like a vet min deal mid-season again, honestly, next year. But I don't think they're going to be chomping at the bit to bring him back. Hollywood Brown, I wouldn't be shocked if he's gone as well. Juju Smith-Schuster, DeAndre Hopkins. On the defensive side, Justin Reid, Nick Bolton, Charles Omenihu. So some key pieces on that defense as well, man. They're going to have some work to do here. They're going to have to draft well again, but that's just what they have done. I mean, the front office is phenomenal. So you mentioned offensive line. I think that's clearly a need, and more weapons. Like, you have so many guys that are wide receivers that are going to be free agents here. So they're going to have to retool that room a little bit. Yeah, Worthy's going to be back. You don't know Rashee Rice's timeline right now, but I think it's offensive line, more weapons, and let's get a Travis Kelce replacement, potentially in the draft. This is a really, really good draft.
I don't know if they will get a Travis Kelce replacement, though, because they gave Noah Gray the extension, which makes me think he is in their future plans. I mean, we've seen him excel, as the number 2 tight end, and a lot of that might be because of Kelce being a big distraction. But at times we've seen him step in and make some big plays, and obviously the team committed to to give him, I believe, a 3 or 4 year extension mid-season this year. So that makes me think they would not address the tight end position in the draft. But then again, if somebody falls to your lap, like a franchise like this, and a guy as creative as Andy Reid, it's hard for me to think that they would pass up on a guy if he really does fit their system.
What do you think about a guy like Colston Loveland from Michigan, who's getting a lot of first-round buzz that is a stud? I think if they fall into his lap at 31, I don't think he'll be there at 31 either. But
I would think, for me, I want them to just go O-line. I don't want them to get cute and try to take a Clyde Edwards-Helaire again. Just go O-line, try to continue to build around it. I mean, clearly, they had other issues in the Super Bowl, but I think ultimately it came down to the line being the biggest issue. So to me, if I'm the Chiefs, I'm taking O-line, best player available, what really fits it, especially with Trey Smith leaving. See who's on the board. If you're not in love with anybody, then maybe you could go on the defensive side. I wouldn't worry about wide receiver. I think with Rice coming back, obviously you took Worthy last year. You don't need to worry about that side of the ball. So I think maybe you target defense. You can always go D-line, or if you like someone for the secondary. I know obviously they seem pretty good at developing in the secondary. They just end up losing the guys after the fact. They're having to trade them away. But it does seem like every year It's like, oh, what are the Chiefs going to do? They got to pay this guy, that guy, and then they get rid of those guys. And then all of a sudden it's like, here comes another couple studs that they just develop and are just plugged right in. Because I know they're also losing Justin Reid as well. I don't think he'll come back. But it kind of reminds me of like
linebacker too.
Yeah, but it kind of reminds me of like the Patriots back in the day, where they were always really good at knowing when to not pay players and let them walk. And then they would just, maybe the Chiefs can be better in the draft, because it seems like Belichick was never good in the draft. It was just in free agency and these like no-name guys that he would just build up and turn in the guys, and then he'd get cute in the draft and they wouldn't pan out. But
yeah.
So I don't know. But ultimately, I think there's a couple different ways they can go this draft.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of free agency, I don't think this is going to be like spending big on anyone outside the organization. I think they're going to try to retain some guys and just replace people through the draft. I mean, who sticks out to you that you think they realistically could replace? Like, I think Reid's going to be too expensive. I think Trey Smith's going to be too expensive. Maybe you can get a deal with Nick Bolton to bring him back at linebacker.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think you let Reid walk. I mean, I'm a big proponent of you don't, when you're in your Super Bowl window, you don't overpay the premium guys. Like, I don't think you're ever going to win. And obviously, this sounds hypocritical because the Eagles just paid Saquon, overpaid for him, and they won a Super Bowl. And that was, one of the biggest reasons for them taking a step forward. But I don't think they necessarily need to pay, Reid. I would be fine if they went with Malachi Starks, or Malachi. I'm saying that right. Malachi Starks out of Georgia. I know he's a stud. I mean, will he be there at 31? I don't know. I don't hate it. I mean,
probably not, but safety slide. Usually they slide.
The thing. I mean, you've seen that the past couple of years. Like Kyle Hamilton, obviously, was projected to be a top 5 talent, and then ends up falling to Baltimore like at 15 or 14 or whatever he fell. So,
yeah,
we see it time and time again. So it's always a possibility. I mean, if I'm looking at the O line, I wouldn't hate them going for a guard replacement. I mean, at 31, you could go with like Tyler Booker at Bama. You could go with Donovan Jackson at Ohio State, or maybe you could go with one of these like hybrid type tackles, that may fall there, like some of the smaller guys. Like I don't hate, Josh Conley Jr. or Josh Conerly Jr. from Oregon. I mean, I don't know if he'll be there. He's one of the higher rated prospects, but he's a smaller guy at 6'4", 305. He played tackle in college, but has, guard potential. So I don't hate that pick at all. So, we'll see ultimately. In Kelvin Banks Jr. too from Texas, 6'4", 320. I don't mind these, undersized tackles that give you guard flexibility. But then again, look at the Eagles. I mean, they have fucking Mekhi Becton at their guard at 6'7", 360. So
yeah,
does it really matter, the standards? I mean, I guess it's a little different going.
It's the arm length. The arm length is really what they look for, and it's like, like people were giving Rashawn Slater shit for his arm length, and he's a dominant tackle, right? So some guys, it's fine. Depends on your technique. Other guys, it's like, you know what? Like you can't get to those speed rushers. Your arms aren't long enough, and they kick him inside the guard. And like Kelvin Banks is one of those guys. Although I think Banks will be gone before 31 for sure. But Banks is a guy that they're saying try him out at tackle. If it doesn't work out, he's going to be very, very good guard. So there's a lot of those guys in this draft. And I agree with you too. Like I think the Chiefs they probably will go offensive line in that first round.
But you have to,
given what happened in the Super Bowl, and you might lose Trey Smith. I think it makes too much sense. And they're a team that knows that they got to build through the trenches to protect Patrick Mahomes. Now, before we bring in Drock,
part any defense,
100%. Yeah. Now, before we bring in Drock, I kind of want to pose something to you. Mahomes this year didn't throw for 4,000 yards for the first time in his career.
Whoa!
26 touchdowns to 11 picks. Last year, he had 27 touchdowns to 14 picks. Very different stat line from his first year as a starter, throwing for 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns, or even in 2022, throwing for 5,200 yards and 41 touchdowns. I am not looking at this as like a negative on Mahomes because the past 2 seasons, they lost to the Super Bowl. They won a Super Bowl, right? They're winning games. They're doing it in a different way. And it's not that Mahomes has to light the world on fire. I look at it from this perspective. I think it shows that Mahomes can adapt his game as defenses kind of adjust to him. And also he's get later into his career, where I think it's a very positive thing that, hey, 10 years from now, like Mahomes is not going to have to beat you with his arm throwing the ball 50 yards down the field, right? Like it's not like he's a Tom Brady where he's a strict pocket passer. Like he's been so good maneuvering outside the pocket and making these crazy plays. I think this proves that as he gets later and later in his career, he's still going to be that dude because he can adapt to defenses adjusting towards his game. Do you agree with that sentiment, or do you think it's a little bit of a problem that his stats just aren't nearly what they were previously the past 2 years?
I think the difference is the fact that the defense has become such a bigger part of this team. And I think they've also, we've seen in all their Super Bowl runs, like one of the biggest factors, especially in the Super Bowl itself. And I said that coming into the game, that in all those games, they had one of their running backs just going off in the Super Bowl. I mean, I remember Damian Williams. I remember, Isiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon. So it's, I think it's just the fact that they're trying to go more towards a run first and play good defense type of style. And they're like, we don't need to, Patrick Mahomes doesn't have to be Superman in the regular season. I also think it's based off of how defenses are playing them. Like they don't want to let Patrick Mahomes beat them. They're fine with, allowing them to gash him with the run and stuff. And
they'll go.
You notice it all season. There's not a lot of big plays. And I mean, they don't also have Tyreek, who they used to have. Like, worthy. I know you drafted him to be like that, but to say he'll ever get to that level is a little crazy. Tyreek at his peak was, top one receiver in the league.
Yeah, he was the best.
So And obviously when that's all going on, you had Kelce in his prime, and Kelce is not, where he was when they had peak Tyreek. So I think it's a combination of, the weapons not being as good and defenses playing them differently, and, their defense ultimately being better. I mean, if you're up, like 2 scores going into the fourth quarter, I mean, what's the point of like having him put up all these numbers? I mean, he's got his MVPs. It's not like, in Buffalo and, Baltimore, where it seems like, and even Detroit, where it's like they're in the fourth quarter and, these guys haven't done anything. So they're trying to get some extra stats for their quarterbacks. Like the Chiefs are like, we don't care. Like he doesn't need stats. Like we know we're going to be in the Super Bowl. He doesn't need MVPs. He doesn't need to prove anything else.
I agree with you. And it's also like, I think they missed Pacheco all year too. Like their running game wasn't good with Hunt. He did his job, like he did what was. I always watch Kareem Hunt. I'm like, he just looks so slow and just gets what the defense gives him. You know what I mean? And he'll break a tackle here and there. He's got good hands, but he's not doing anything special. Like the running game was just not there as well. So I think that
I mean, he didn't look the same, and even Hunt like obviously looked better, but he did not look anything special to me. I mean, neither of those guys were putting him over the top. Pacheco didn't have the juice he once had. P. Ryan wasn't a terrible option in the passing game, but even him, he wasn't like that McKinnon-esque type of juice that they had, the past 2 Super Bowl runs. And so I think they need to address it. Hopefully Pacheco comes back. I mean, there's a couple names in free agency I don't hate if they ultimately don't decide to address the running back position. Like, Rico Dowdle had a pretty good season with Dallas. He's a free agent. I wouldn't hate it if they, went out and got him to pair with Pacheco. But, we'll see what they ultimately do this offseason.
I think they'll probably draft one at some point. Maybe on day 3, like a round 4, round 5. It's such a deep running back class where
it seems like most drafts they do. Like everybody does.
And Pacheco's rookie contract's almost up at this point, so I think he has one more year, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, because he obviously doesn't have the 5th-year option.
Yeah, so I don't know how much
first-round pick.
I don't know how much they're going. I mean, I don't know how much he'd command in the market, but I don't know. I think they should.
What he would have 2 years ago.
Yeah, and he did not look nearly as good off the injury. So I think it's something they should think about later on in the draft, given how good this running back class is. All right, that wraps that up. Let's get Jock in here for some questions.
What up, boys?
What's going on,
yo?
3 questions tonight from a friend that has yet to ask questions. He is a diehard Chiefs fan, Mr. Bobby Lightsole. Let's go.
Let's go, Bobby.
Love to have some Celtics on here that we haven't asked questions. First question he's got for us tonight. You guys covered it a tad, but what should the Chiefs do with Kelce?
I mean, I just think you let him retire a Chief. I mean, he's going to go out on his own terms. At this point, I don't think you let him go. I think, if you're going to cut him ultimately, like when it eventually gets to that point, which I don't think you're at yet because he still obviously has stuff in the tank, he's going to retire a Chief. I think, he's going to go out on his terms. I think there was a chance he may have even gone out if they won that Super Bowl.
If they 3-peated, I could have seen him calling it quits. Now with the loss, maybe he's like, let's give it another run.
I could see this year Noah Gray getting some more run. I mean, you don't give the guy, and I know it wasn't a big contract, but you don't give him a midseason extension if you don't envision him as a bigger part of your future. Like you don't do that for a guy like that. So to me, that tells me kind of where they're at, and I could see him carving out a bigger role next year. And as the contract progresses through and Kelce ages more.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of smoke that he's going to retire from people in league circles. I think he's going to give it one more year. You run it back one more year, and then he calls it quits in his own terms, and that's what it is.
All right, second question Bobby's got for us. What changes would you make with the offense?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to make a few changes because, we both think Trey Smith is gone, so that's a big hole to fill. And outside of that even, I mean, that's your best lineman. I wouldn't point to him and be like, that was the issue during the Super Bowl was the whole overall group. So I think you have to, try to get a couple fill-in guys in free agency. You're definitely going to have to draft someone at least in the 1st or 2nd round or 3rd, like with your day 1 or day 2 picks, got to address the offensive line. I wouldn't hate another wide receiver because you're going to be losing Hollywood. I mean, a lot of Hollywood, Hopkins, Juju, you got all these veteran guys in there. I mean, not only is Rice coming off of an injury, but there's a very good chance he's going to be facing a suspension. So I think you need to address the wide receiver position. I would say I'd rather see them do it in the draft, but if you're going to do it in free agency, maybe go the veteran route. I wouldn't. I'd probably let all 3 of those guys walk. I mean, maybe you could take another stab at Brown, but I don't know. He didn't show enough to me to keep him around. Obviously, tight ends, I think you're fine. Running backs, you could draft someone. I think wait and see if Pacheco's healthy. I think it'll be a little bit different than this past year.
Yeah, they got to fill 2 offensive line spots, left tackle and right guard. You're going to have Joe Thuney back at left guard. You're going to have Creed Humphrey, who's a beast at center. You're stuck in this Jawan Taylor contract, unfortunately, and he was probably your 4th best lineman last year, but his cap hit in 2025 is $27 million, and it's also $27 million in 26. You can get out after 25, but Taylor's locked in that right tackle spot, Mr. False Start himself. So you got to fill 2 offensive line spots. I have faith in that front office to find some guys. And, I mean, that's what they did after they lost to Tampa Bay. They really went after that offensive line, and they just saw the same thing happen. So maybe a little PTSD here. They'll fix the offensive line. The receiver room is just barren outside of Xavier Worthy. You're going to have to add some talent there. They'll definitely draft a guy or two. They'll find someone in free agency. I mean, I don't know, man. They're not going to be shopping at the top of the market. I don't know how big of a contract is Hollywood Brown going to command. Do you bring back Juju Smith-Schuster on a really cheap deal? I could see that. He's been in the building twice now. I think D-Hop's probably gone, but he's still looking for a ring. I saw people floating around D-Hop back to Houston though, which I don't think would be a terrible thing for both sides there. So I mean, yeah, I mentioned it. I think they draft a running back late. I think they draft a receiver. And the offensive line pretty damn hard.
You guys basically did cover this, but what would you say their biggest priority is going for them into the offseason?
Offensive line.
Yeah, offensive line. Definitely offensive. I think we've hammered that point home. For sure, it's the offensive line here. I mean, when you lose a Super Bowl like that, when you're just getting bullied and the team's not even blitzing you, that's a problem. And no one really bullies a Chiefs offensive line like that.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, they're still my favorite to come out of the AFC next year.
Yeah, I mean, how could they not be? But it'll be all the talking heads over the summer be like, oh, I think the Ravens got it this year. I think the Bills got it this year. It's like, oh, here we go again. The last 5 years, right, guys?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a special type of quarterback to get past Mahomes. It's either Hurts or Tom Brady. So, I mean, I guess Burrow did it once, but, ultimately he couldn't get it done. So until Burrow, Allen, or Jackson, get past them, and I guess Burrow has, but, I mean, that's going back so long, but it's just hard to pick against them. They just, Mahomes owns them. Hey, Chiefs fans, you freaking own those guys. Patty is daddy.
That is true. All right, guys, that wraps up our Chiefs 2024 breakdown and offseason outlook. Appreciate you tuning in.